My name is Seth Swirsky. I have loved the Beatles ever since I was a small boy growing up on Long Island in the 60s. I remember playing Hey Jude in front of my entire elementary school, imagining I was Paul McCartney, British accent and all. Those times were so amazing, and the Beatles were everything to me. So it's not surprising that over the years, when I met someone who told me they had a personal story about themselves and the Beatles, I was all ears. About 5 years ago, I bought a video camera and set out to film as many of those stories as I could find, to share them with people who love the Beatles as much as I did, and still do.
And now, McCall and Brill.
The comedy team of McCall and Brill debuted on The Ed Sullivan Show on February 9th, 1964, the same night as the Beatles.
We go to the dressing room. We hear a knock on our door. Okay. I look, and it's a guy with a funny haircut, and he says exactly, "Give us a Coke Loaf." It was John Lennon,
yes,
by the way.
Of course.
Yeah. And I said to Mitzi, "Can you tell me what he said?" And he starts to laugh. And he said, "Give us a Coke Loaf."
And then he points to the machine.
The Coke machine.
The Coke machine. Give us a Coke, love.
Yeah, give us a Coke, love. But it sounded like, give us a Coke Loaf.
So I said, come in here.
Oh
my God. Now I was getting a little excited because it's dawning on me that this is one of those people that are causing all of this hullabaloo. We're way up high. And I said, can you believe, looking down, this is all for you?
Pointing to the streets. And he said, no, I think it's Faringo. And we went, Faringo? Who's Faringo?
Faringo.
And he was laughing
First
the whole time.
give him a glove, a cook glove,
and then give him a cook, and then Faringo. We thought it was a Jewish holiday.
Yeah.
Where were you going, Faringo?
I'm in a really I am.
Peter, you were on that variety show, Thank Your Lucky Stars, with the Beatles in, I guess, the early 60s. I can only imagine what that scene was like in swinging London.
There was an amazing scene, and it was very small. It wasn't as big as people would have you believe. It's like, I did Thank Your Lucky Stars, and the Beatles were on it, and I asked them where they were going that night, and they said they were going to the ad-lib, so I went to the ad-lib. And it was really great, because when I got to the ad-lib, you got in a lift, and I got in the lift with John Lennon. That's how small the scene was. And I wasn't stupid enough to say where you're going because the lift only went to one place, you know what I mean? So he got in there and I sat at a table with me and he got 2 Bacardis and I got 2 sodas because it was a 2-drink minimum and I was 15. I couldn't get a drink. I was going to have a ginger ale or whatever. But he says, I'll get the 2 Bacardis, you get 2 Cokes. So I had 2 Bacardis, 2 Cokes. He gave me a Bacardi, I gave him a Coke and we were drinking together, you know. But in the elevator, as we got in the elevator, in the background was playing I'm In With the In Crowd by Dobie Gray, which is very like, I was going, this is like a movie. I'm in a lift with the Beatles, and I'm in with the in crowd is on there, you know.
I'm in with the in crowd.
In '67, I was living in this news house in London, very pretty little place. And I'm lying in bed, and about 9:30 on a Sunday morning, the phone rings, which was unusual for my house. And it was McCartney. And Paul said, we're doing this thing over at EMI. Would you like to come and be a part of it? We've invited a bunch of our friends. We're going to have an orchestra there and some balloons. It should be a fun time. Do you want to come? So I said, absolutely, Paul. I'll be there. We went down to EMI, to the big room there, and witnessed All You Need Is Love being televised. I think it was the very first satellite broadcast that had ever taken place. So it was kind of an important event, and any excuse for a party in the 60s was taken at the drop of a hat. Sure, you want a party? Let's go. It was a very interesting afternoon and early evening. The orchestra was indeed there. It went flawlessly. I can hear myself whistling at the end, and, you know, I just have a great, warm feeling about that day. You know, we were safe, we were in a recording studio. I looked around, everyone from Marianne and Mick, you know, lots of people were there. We knew it was a special afternoon. We knew that something magical was going to go on.
It's so tremendous. And everybody sang at the end. I mean, you get the feeling when you're watching it. It seems like the pinnacle of the 60s to me. The greatest feeling was happening.
It was a party to sit there and watch John do that incredible performance while still chewing gum, by the way, if you notice, was a thrill for me. I was a big fan. I still am a big fan. I go back with John a long, long time. I mean, I saw them live in 1959 as Johnny and the Moondogs. And I remember when they were coming down to London to record their first album. But to see them at that moment was an incredibly inclusive feeling. And I was so glad to be there. It was very nice of Paul to invite me.
Jackie DeShannon was one of the first female singer-songwriters of the rock era, and one of the opening acts on the Beatles' first American tour.
The opening acts were towards the back of the plane, and the Beatles and their entourage was in front. And we were kind of told not to wander past our little domain. But they would come back very often, and more often than not. I usually had my guitar in the back and was playing, writing, doing whatever. On one of these occasions, George sat down by me with his guitar and asked me if I would show him how to play the riff of my song, When You Walk in the Room. How do you do that riff, And of course I totally forgot how to play it, but eventually I got going and we played it together. It was an amazing thing. Speaking of George, we filled the time with different things to do, but I always loved Monopoly. In conversation back and forth on the plane, I'm sure that subject came up. So here's the greatest band in the world, and I am playing Monopoly with the fabulous George Harrison, and I could not concentrate on my Monopoly game.
Did George win the Monopoly game? Or
I think that George won it. I'm pretty sure he did.
Steve Kipner is a songwriter who has written hit songs for artists like Olivia Newton-John and Chicago, among many others.
I was in this duo called Tintin in 1968, and we were produced by one of the Bee Gees, Maurice Gibb. He was married to Lulu, and Ringo lived just down the street from him. It happened to be my birthday, and I'm standing outside with Maurice, and Ringo just walks past. Oh my God, that's Ringo's Starr. It's ridiculous. Maurice introduced me, and Ringo said, do you want to come and have a game of pool? And I went, sure. So Maurice and I went about 5 houses down the street, and on the other side of the street was where Ringo lived. It was, how can Ringo live somewhere? It was amazing. About 10 minutes later, Lulu called up and said, Maurice, you've got to come home for dinner. So I thought, well, that's it. We can't finish the game. Then Ringo said, well, I'm going to make some baked beans on toast and watch a movie. It's a mad, 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 mad world. Do you want to watch it with me? And I said, yeah, that's going to be great. And there I am having dinner cooked by Ringo and watching a movie. It was just amazing. And I kept thinking, wow, who would have guessed what happens on your birthday?
We all arrived in the office one day, and about 10, I think it was, in the morning, the phone started ringing off the hook, and most of the calls were coming from the States. And it was girls sobbing and crying, and oh my God, is Paul dead? And someone had ran a record backwards, and it said Paul is dead, and so this rumor was like wildfire across America, and everyone in America called us, and the whole place was going mad, and sort of even we got a little worried because we didn't know. I mean, we just got in the office. Who knows what might have happened that night, if he'd had an accident or something, and we didn't know about it. So we called Paul up, got him out of bed, said, Paul, you all right? He says, what do you want? I'm sleeping. Well, we want to know if you're okay. He says, well, why? He said, well, there's a rumour going around the States that you're dead. He said, well, I'm not dead. Fuck off. And that was that, Derek's office called him, and I didn't know that they'd called him, so I called him, We all called him to see what was going on, and that's why I think he got a little aggravated about it all. But, he just went, I'm not dead,
We were playing in London at the Astoria Theatre. We were having a rehearsal during the day, one of those days, and the guy that was playing Ringo at the time, his name was Louis Colucci, nice Italian fella from Brooklyn, New York. He comes up to me and he says, "Hey, Jimmy, I will give you $500 if that's not George Martin standing in line to buy tickets for the show." So I said, "Okay, I'll go ahead and fall for your joke." And I went out there, and lo and behold, there was George Martin, 6'4", 6'5", real tall guy, standing in line with all these people to buy tickets for our show. It was really something really surreal that you'd see out of the Twilight Zone. So I walked up to him and I said, "Mr. Martin," I looked up to him, I said, "Are you really buying tickets for our show?" And he says, "Oh, you must play George." I said, "Yeah, I do. My name is Jimmy Poe, and we're doing a rehearsal here, but would you mind being our guest instead of, actually buying tickets?" And he goes, "Oh, that would be lovely. Thank you very much." So the curtain comes up, and we're doing She Loves You on stage. It's like the second song in the show. All of a sudden, I look down, and there in like the third or fourth row, dead center, is George Martin. And he's sitting there like this with his fingers up to his, and he's looking at us. After the show, I heard them, coming up this spiral staircase. They seemed like they were lost. So I came up to the top of the staircase and I said, "You're coming the right way, Mr. Martin, just keep coming." And of course on stage, we were doing Liverpudlian accents. So his wife all of a sudden goes, "Oh, George, you're right, they are American." And then he comes up stage, up to the dressing room, and I introduced him to the rest of the guys, and the guys were all just like, "Oh my God, I can't believe this is George Martin." And it was really funny because his two little daughters, they were little girls at the time, they asked us for our autographs. And we were kind of embarrassed because we thought, why would George Martin's daughters want our autograph? We're just pretending to be the Beatles. And then he said, "I must tell you, there were times during the show tonight that I was drifting off and I was imagining you being the four lads."
It wasn't long afterwards that I had the honor of meeting Sir George myself. And it was really such a thrill to tell him some of the people I had interviewed over the last couple of months. I just saw Norman Smith, the Beatles' first engineer.
Yeah, he just interviewed Norman.
He interviewed Norman Smith, yeah.
When was this?
March.
Really? I thought he was dead.
But Sir George was mistaken. Norman Hurricane Smith, the Beatles' original and longtime recording engineer, was living in Sussex, England.
This is Seth.
It's a great pleasure to meet you.
Oh, okay.
It's a real honor.
We'll come from
real
the back.
honor.
I can't actually believe I'm in the car with Norman Smith. There were 6 people who made up the actual sound of the Beatles. The producer, George Martin, the 4 Beatles themselves, and the man John Lennon referred to as Normal.
Well, welcome to Beckley.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Not at all. Just add a little more fuel here.
Okay.
An essential part of England, a coal fire.
Norman, do you remember anything about the recording of She Loves You?
I had to go down to make an adjustment to a mic. And by this time, the handwritten lyrics was on the music stand. So I went across and read the lyrics and the title on top, and it said, "She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. She loves you, yeah, 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 yeah." That's all it had on the lyrics. And I thought to myself, oh, well, this is going to be some sort of a funny song. Because up to then, I mean, I'd loved every song they had done. But I thought, oh, this one's going to be a bit iffy, I think, by the look of that lyric. But of course, once they started, I mean, it was just fantastic. And that's how it was really with every song. It wasn't long before I was up in my feet, jigging away to every one. It was that enjoyable. Hard Day's Night, fancied some bongos on it. I think I suggested it to the boys. Now, I started at the age of 6 being a drummer, so I knew something about drums as well. Anyway, I gave them to Ringo. I showed him how to hold them in his knees, etc. I bathed and made a right hash of it. So I said to him, "No, look, you do it like this, and all this business, And, but he still couldn't get it, so I said, "OK, I'll do it." So I did.
As if engineering the Beatles' hits for 4 years and then producing Pink Floyd's first 3 albums wasn't enough, Norman had a worldwide smash with his own song, Oh Babe, What Would You Say, in 1972.
Hurricane Smith is with us tonight. He's from England. He engineered many of the Beatles albums, and he had an ambition to record his own material, and now at the age of 49, he has got hit singles in England, and Oh Babe, which is on his first album, is a big hit already here. This is his first trip to America. Would you welcome, please, singer, songwriter, Hurricane Smith.
Have I a hope for half a chance to even ask if I could dance with you? Would there suddenly be sunshine on a cold and rainy day? Oh, babe, what would you say?
I'm picking up good vibrations.
Brian, did you ever meet the Beatles in the 60s? Like, do you remember meeting Paul?
I met him in a recording studio in 1967. He came by with Derek Taylor, his publicist. He played She's Leaving Home for my wife and my wife cried. It's Monday morning at 5 o'clock she is, you know, he played it for us. Before he recorded it, he played it for me. Hearing that song, I was very touched by it. I thought it was a beautiful tune, beautiful song, beautiful tune.
Brian, what was it like when a Beatles album came out for you?
I remember listening to Rubber Soul with my wife and some friends, and we were smoking some marijuana, and we were stoned, and Rubber Soul just took me away. It took me away, so I went to the piano and I started writing Pet Sounds. It turned me on to Pet Sounds. It was a moment that lived forever in my heart.